so be it. One of the things that has happened this year is that what the university has done is take a very close examination of its budget. And the university's budget is in much worse status than it has been. Well, actually, that it has been in the last few years, mostly because for the last few years, what the university has been doing is essentially dipping into reserve funds, et cetera, to cover some differences between what we get from tuition, what we get from the state allocation for each student, and what our real costs are. And maybe the best way to understand that is that I think it was 2008-9 when the state said there was going to be no more growth money. And you remember that pretty much from 2005-06 to that point, we had not only been growing by about 1,000 students a year, we had also been recruiting about 100 students every year, 100 new faculty every year, and Towson's state allocation for students rose from about 5,000 to about 6,200, maybe 5,200, but per student. And so that means that what the university got for every student it enrolled was tuition plus fees plus the state allocation. In I believe 2009-10, the state essentially said we don't have funds to continue to fund tuition, the state allocation, and therefore the university's position, the system's position was to therefore have no growth in enrollment. What was interpreted as no growth was within last year's enrollment plus or minus 1.5%. And invariably each year for the next 3 years it was plus 1.5%. And if you understand the concept of compound interest, you understand that when you put 1.5% together for 3 successive years, the total exceeds 4.5%. The total is closer to 5% or and if you look at Towson's allocation of state funding for students, it also went down over those same 3 years. The math is relatively simple. If the numerator stays the same and the denominator gets bigger, by definition the quotient goes down. So we've gone down from the height that we were. The fact of the matter is that in 2009-10, I think just as Jim Clements was departing as provost to go to Virginia as president, there was a meeting of the executive council, which is the president and vice presidents, and Bob Corritt said, I understand we're all ready for the fall. And what he soon heard from Kate Denniston, who was then the acting provost, was not exactly. The deans have met with me recently and told me that they need a minimum of 40 full-time faculty for us to be able to cover all the students who will be here. The 40 came from a meeting of the deans, and before that, the deans were asked to sort of check with every one of their chairs and say, what do you have covered, what do you need covered for the coming year? When we were asked to do that, I said I need 12 people. What astonished me at the end of the discussion was that Kate added up the numbers that each of us called out. It totaled 12. I went to the president with that. So we got, in fact, 12 out of 40 positions, although we're clearly not the largest of the colleges by any means. What has since happened is, and those 12 positions were initially going to be one-year positions to be followed by searches for the 40 lines for tenure track or tenured faculty. Again, trying to keep with Bob's commitment to recruit a tenure track or tenured faculty member for every 20 new students admitted. My understanding is that the university has effectively, and the university kept those 40 faculty repeatedly over the last several years, is that the university has essentially been dipping into reserve funds to sort of keep this operation. with the new interim chief financial officer, basically his report to the new president and the provost was, we can't keep doing this. We have to have some retrenchments. We've been told we have to reduce by 3 the total number of full-time lecturers we have. And best estimate is that we will be able to do that with retirements, et cetera, and attrition, that we won't be laying anybody off. We also need to add a couple of lecturers for increased enrollment in a couple of programs, but I think we've now gone through all of those numbers. What we also have been asked, and this is the president instructed the provost who told the deans, is to follow the workload. What was pretty clear was that there was great variation in workload assignments, both within colleges and across colleges. And what we've been all told to do is to follow the workload policy, which is what we've done. For many of the departments in the college, it really didn't change workloads particularly at all. In a couple of departments, it did change them. And sort of that's the background. I had asked the chairs to discuss this with their faculty as we were deliberating workloads. And I assume they did. I had also offered to come to faculty meetings if faculty wanted. I didn't get asked and mistakenly assumed, therefore, that wasn't necessary. It's clear since then, it's become clear since then that that was a step that should have been taken. So, anyways, that's the background.
Dr. Lauren, first I want to say thank you for giving us the opportunity to express our concerns, our thoughts and ideas. One thing I want to have some clarification is, I'm wearing the program director's hat right now asking the question. When the workload document was first developed, I don't think they considered the fact that the programs, a lot of the graduate programs have grown a lot, tremendous over the past couple of dozen years. And for programs that as big as having over 300 graduate students or 400 students, the devising responsibilities are not counted in the current work document and does not consider the size of the program. So I wonder whether the work that we do in the big programs will be given a fair kind of resources so that we will be able to run the program as effectively as we have been able to do.
Yeah.
But,
want more detail?
But the situation is that for now, my understanding is that like for the instructional technology program, we have 3 tracks: school and remediate, and instructional design development, educational technology. And all those 3 tracks will count for like over 400 students. We have 2 program directors, David Robinson and myself. We share 1 program director's course release, and that put a lot of pressure on us. How we can run the program with only sharing 1 program director's course release.
Well, remember that, and there's absolutely no question that, and I'm not sure, but I think the Towson workload policy was developed either in 2002 or 2003 by the Dean's Council, I think. And it has not only not, that part of the workload policy has not only not been restructured, I don't know since I've gotten here of any request to do so. So that doesn't mean it doesn't need to be restructured. It means it is what it is because that's what was approved in 2003 and it hasn't been changed since. Do we need to recommend that it be revisited? Absolutely. Can we get it revisited immediately? Probably not, particularly in this economic situation. Essentially what chairs can do is request some kind of consideration if there's a separate graduate program that hasn't received its appropriate allocation of course units. And the course units are to cover both the direction of the program and advising grad students, which becomes possible if you're talking about 3 course units for 100 students. And as I said earlier today, I think if we want to sort of lead a set of requests to the provost and the president about modifying the workload policy, we can begin to put that document together and put together the arguments in terms of this is the kind of time commitment. This is the frequency with which faculty meet graduate students face to face. This is what the workload demand is. Is it likely to change things for 2012-13? Probably not, because no final decisions about 2012-13 are going to be made till after April 15th. I mean, we don't know what the state budget's going to be. If you read the Sun last week, the worst case, the doomsday scenario is to reduce the university system budget by $115 million. $115 million reduction is a $12.5 million reduction to our budget, to the campus's budget. So until they know what resources are going to be available, what they've got to do is to start, and part of it is financial, part of it is equity, part of it is the fact that there is considerable disparity, and at a college level, I have met with both chairs and faculty who say, my teaching load is such, why are other people's teaching load different and lower? And this includes, the worst case scenario was probably a very desirable candidate for one of the departments. The chair had unilaterally negotiated, I think, a 1-2 load for the first year, going up to a 2-2 load for the second year. And not surprisingly, when the candidate got the contract, there was a quick phone call saying, this isn't what I agreed to. And I pointed out that the chair was, no chair was authorized to make that deal. Not only wasn't the chair authorized, I'm not authorized to make that deal. And so part of it is to get some equity, to get workload assignments absolutely transparent. The other part of it is there's been incredible, just around advising, there was an incredible disparity across the colleges. We're one of the few colleges that actually assigns course units for undergraduate advising of 50 or more. We have either the luxury or the responsibility of PDS, working in PDSs, and we have within the Towson workload a course unit assignment for PDS assignments, and we take that. Again, if the workload needs to be revised, we need to put together a basis for its revision, but the workload revisions are not determined by the college. They're determined by the campus, and by the president, and ultimately by the system. So, and let me add one thing. I think the selection of Dr. Lechke clearly reflects a message that the system wants us to understand that we are a master's comprehensive, and that is our role in the system. And as much as Bob Corrett wanted us to be that other state university, and you remember that he would regularly follow that with, we're not going to be a research one, but we could be like NC State, Michigan State, and Arizona State, all of which are research ones. I think the message is pretty clear, and one of the first instructions that Dr. Lechke gave to the provost was, it says 7 to 8 workload units, that's where we have to be. So, yes?
It's my understanding that we're one of the few colleges that have departments that are fully graduate level, where every faculty member teaches a complete load of graduate classes.
Okay.
We're unique in that way. We're also unique in that we have, as is already pointed out, well over 400 students in a graduate program. We are in a unique situation, and if we need to talk about equity, in our case, equity would mean a lower course load rather than a higher course load. Because we have a program that, number one, is bringing in a tremendous amount of money. Number two, we have faculty that are teaching complete graduate level courses. I mean, that is a horse of a different color. And we have graduate directors who are being made to be responsible for not just the advising load, but you have to remember that there's all kinds of advising that's not on the record, like talking to people and interviewing people about whether or not they are going to get into the program, working, you know, whether they want to be in the program. We have situations where people are, they're adults, they have families, they have all kinds of situations. It's not just, I've done both, and I've been in both situations, and I'm telling you that it's a very different set of circumstances where you have, at the undergraduate level, you hand, and I'm not putting down the level of energy and time put into undergraduate advising by any means, because I had close to or over 100 advisees at one point undergrad. But there's a difference between handing them the program and you know, just checking off which courses they're taking, and advising adults with all kinds of life circumstances and trying to work them into a program. You know, I think that we need to, you know, we need you to be a strong advocate for us to change the workload document, do it as you know, to work on proposing changes to the workload document that covers our unique circumstances that other colleges do not have.
Well, every other college that has faculty who teach graduate students and graduate courses, I assume, relative to the course, have the same challenges. I mean, the College of Health Professions has a substantial graduate student enrollment.
But do the faculty teach?
Some of their faculty,
all graduate?
some faculty teach only graduate courses, some faculty teach a mix, and some faculty teach only undergraduate courses. The same is true of, but so part of it, and you're absolutely right, but there are a couple of realities. One is, when we looked at workload assignments in past years, there weren't a number of course units assigned for graduate advising. There were course units assigned for additional research. So the change in workloads largely became a function of the provost basically following the workload document that says if you want a second course offer research, you need to buy it out.
But at the folks at the undergraduate level are going to get, I mean, you're able to get an undergrad if you're able to get a research release, or 3 units for research and 3 units for advising. Is that correct?
If they have more than 50.
And we can't.
Yes, you can.
We can't because they have been told that graduate directors have to do all the advising.
No one has told them
never said that.
Absolutely no one.
That's not true.
If you have more than 100 students, there are 3 course units available. One could go to each of your directors, and one could go to a faculty member for advising. You're absolutely right that the policy probably doesn't reflect the size and scope and nature of our graduate
400
programs.
students.
But there is no record that up until now anybody has attempted to document what the size and the scope, etc.
That has to be
So,
done immediately.
so that's the first thing we have to do, is to say, this is what, in fact, this is what's involved in graduate advising. This is what's involved in running these graduate programs. And effectively that we probably need some other categories. You know, if a graduate program is 200, if a graduate program is 300, you know, basically they're dealing with a couple of realities. One is to try to get equity in the application of the workload document across. I may have said this already, but we may be one of the only colleges that gives credit for undergraduate advising. College of Liberal Arts doesn't award all of its new faculty in their first 3 years a 3-4 load. They start them with a 3-4 load because of the nature of the demand. So one of the things that Marcia's been committed to is to say, let's start by getting everybody to follow the same set of rules, because, and part of that is a function of her looking, I mean, not only looking at the P&T documents, but also looking, I mean, we've been filling out, and chairs have been filling out over the last 2 months, 2 to 3 months, sort of, tell me what the workload is of every one of your full-time faculty. And looking at those, and looking at what's being claimed, et cetera. So I absolutely agree with everybody that one of the things that we must do is to sit down and put together, here's what the nature of the existing policy is, here's the basis on which we believe it should be changed.
Okay, and you will advocate for us with this?
In the same way that I have continued, in the same way that I advocated for us to get 12 lines, because I was sure if I asked for 12, I figured I'd get 6. I was clear if I asked for 6, I was not going to have somebody stop and say, are you sure you don't want 12? In the same way that I've insisted that as long as the workload policy says that there's a course unit for PDS, that we claim it. In the same way that I've said if the course policy allows for 1 course unit for undergraduate advising, we will take it. And we're one of the few colleges that does.
During the scramble of the last few weeks when we were trying to figure it all out and get you the information and everything, the message presented to us was pretty clear that a graduate program had the 3 course units, and that included director responsibilities and advising.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm not clear about what was just said about advising now being broken out. So if I understand that correctly.
It's really simple, Steve. The fact of the matter is that you and Barbara could have each taken a unit, and you could have given a member of your faculty the 3rd unit for advising. And again, it's not a unilateral, it's not my decision. It's what it says in the Towson policy.
So but we were led to think one thing. And so we made our decisions and changed our fall schedule accordingly, et cetera. So 3 units, if those 3 units were shared with, or were not used by the program directors,
Mm-hmm.
But were given to other faculty
Mm-hmm.
for release, the program directors would then be at 3-4.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? No release whatsoever for program director administration responsibilities.
Steve,
So that's
Steve,
not acknowledged either?
I haven't disagreed with you
Right.
that there are real problems with the policy. The reality is that the policy needs to be revisited, and we need to revisit it. And I will work with you. I mean, all I can say about the last several weeks is I repeatedly offered to meet with the faculty to have these discussions and was never invited.
News to me.
Well, I can't help it
Okay,
if your
that's fine,
chair didn't
that's fine.
tell you that. I
Okay.
said it repeatedly in both, I think, at the council, and I said it at the leadership meetings every time we talked about workload. You have to understand, being a dean is an interesting thing, because I am not supposed to go around chairs in the same way that when faculty come to me, I don't meet with faculty unless I've had a discussion with the chair, or more often than not, I don't meet with them unless the chair is present in the room, particularly if the faculty member wants to negotiate something. I mean, with all of the wonders of my predecessor, and I say that very positively because he created one of the greatest things in the world called TLN.
I have a question about that. I'm glad
Okay.
you brought that up. I don't want to
I
hog
may
the
be
floor.
sorry I brought it up.
If other people have something to say.
So, the fact of the matter is that the chairs were given copies of both the system and the Towson workload document. Documents are available on the USM website, and they're available on the Towson website. I don't disagree that we need to revisit the issue around graduate programs. But we need to put together a discussion of that. Not unlike a legislator, I'm then going to have to go to my colleague deans and say, we need to do this in a way that meets our respective needs, because it has to be coming from more than one college. So we'll do it.
Well, I do want to say something because I don't want us to set up a system where it's graduate versus undergrad. I represent both. I am the chair of the Department of Early Childhood, even though I do feel sometimes that people think they operate separately. I want to say that I disagree with what you said about graduate and undergraduate advising. I don't know if you know students today, but undergraduate students come with issues, and it's not just checking off the checklist, as you said best, respectfully. I don't see graduate advising being more intense than undergraduate. I think they both are unique and require diligence and insight and organization. So let's not set up a better than system here as we're talking. Let's talk about what is equitable and fair for programs at the undergraduate and the graduate level. There is more leniency toward graduate program in that the number of students that are needed to make a course are less for graduate programs. Where undergraduate course can go up, even though most of ours are at 20 something because of the nature of growth. But you can run a graduate course with a lot less students than an undergraduate course. Let's keep that in mind. And the policy on advising is left up to your chair. I mean, why does a graduate director have to advise every student in the graduate program? Why can't, I mean, it's not written anywhere. If there's 100 graduate students, why does the graduate director have to advise all 100? Why can't they advise 50? And you still get your three credits for advising and 3 credits for graduate director, and someone else take on 50 because it's almost, I mean, I have 100 now as chair, and it takes up 3-4 days a week for me just to advise,
Exactly.
and the ones who are problematic that come because of other issues. So a great deal of my time is spent on that way. Graduate students, a lot of it is online. A great deal. Many graduate students don't want to come in and meet. You know, and once you map out their programs, you don't have to meet every semester and all of that. So I think let's not set up that system because I think it's not for the good of the unit to do that. And so I just want to say that. I mean, because I think sometimes in order to fight a battle, we think we have to put something down to be heard.
Actually, I wasn't putting down, I understand, I respect your viewpoint, I agree with you.
That's why I said respectfully.
However, no, I know. But the situation has to be equitable. And right now, it is not. It is not equitable. When you have somebody like me who's now going to be teaching a 3-4 when the, if I had stayed in Ed, I'd be doing 3-3. There's something wrong there. The other thing I wanted to bring up is the TLN situation, which you mentioned, Ray. When we first started doing TLN in Ed, and we were doing it in graduate reading, the understanding was there would be some benefit to going out to the school systems, you know, taking, it's quite a you know, an extra load to take everything you need and go out to the schools and extra travel and so forth, and that there would be benefit from that. And at first there was benefit from that. We got extra travel money, extra you know, resources as needed. It seems like the TLN situation has really turned to be turned around and is no longer a benefit to us in the way that it should be. And at the very least, we should, every department who does TLN, we certainly do our share in our department, should be getting a certain amount of money back that can be used in a discretionary way.
You do.
Including,
You do.
including toward course releases, including workload. And we're not allowed to, as far as I know, we are not being allowed to use the TLN money, even to rotate a release here and there. And I don't think that's fair. I mean, we bring in a tremendous amount of resources to the university for doing that extra work.
But again, the reality is, so does the undergraduate program.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying that they...
So do the graduate
right.
programs that are offered on campus. What is unique about TLN, which in my view is sort of really interesting and and clearly is a reflection of Dennis Hinkle's brilliance, is the notion that TLN dollars, at least a portion of the revenue comes back to the college and the department. So we, again, I mean, the only time I ever encountered that was at Penn, which does center-based funding. And by center-based funding, that means all of the tuition that you generate, you keep. You get to keep all your revenue. 10% is a tax, and 10 or 12% that goes back to the institution. So the good news is you get to keep all the revenue. The bad news is you pay everybody's salary. The bad news is you pay for the building, you pay for the electricity, you pay for all of that other stuff. And how that comes out. The TLN negotiation that we made recently was to have a substantial number of our faculty who were being paid with TLN dollars come off of TLN budget and become stateside employees, so that the state was picking up the cost of their salaries and their benefits. And the reason for that was very critical, because at some point I fully expect that the benefits package between lecturers and tenure track and tenured faculty will look quite a bit alike. And there was no way in every economic projection that I did that said that we would be bringing in enough TLN money. So, and part of the deal was that if it was open enrollment, that is, if people were paying full tuition, regardless of where they're paying full tuition, regardless of whether it's on campus, at Shady Grove, wherever, those revenues come to the institution, and the institution pays the salaries and benefits of the people teaching them. This is generally for the lecturers. If it's a closed course contract, which many of our contracts are, then TLN funds pay for the people who deliver the courses. The campus takes a portion, and a portion comes back to the college. I think 2 years ago, or a year ago, maybe 2 years ago, in the leadership group, we went over the entirety of, here's all the resources here's what's our balances, here's all the resources we generate, here's how much comes back to the college, here's how much comes back to the different departments. If you feel that too much is coming back to the departments, what do you think is a reasonable, too much coming back to the college, what's a reasonable share? We agreed to reduce what was coming back to the college and did. We also agreed that every department in the college would get a minimum amount from TLN. We also used TLN funds before we distribute it to cover a variety of common cost, and it may be cost associated with staffing this operation. It may be cost associated with whatever. We used it, for example, if we needed to bring in lecturers that we couldn't bring in from the outside, from the state. And those were all taken off the top, and then funding is distributed. There's no question that the travel restrictions have reduced the number of visits we have. Having just last week attended a meeting that reviewed the travel policies for every college on campus, I can tell you we pay more for travel than anybody else. Most across the campus will get a couple of $100 or $600 maximum. What the leadership group said was that what we wanted to do, insofar as possible, is to cover the entirety of cost for one trip. And that chairs then get notified, and they should have been notified sometime in the last couple weeks, that this amount of our budget has not yet been expended, and therefore, if there are people who need or want to take a second trip, they can seek those funds, because we clearly want to spend all of the state money that we get, which is about $25,000 a year now. It's been cut a couple of times, but it's about $25,000. We double that. We basically pay $50,000 to $60,000 to $70,000 a year in travel for that one trip.
I don't know, it seems to me that over the years I've gotten less and less for travel, not certainly not, it's
You-
shrinking.
well,
And plus, there are so many restrictions. You have to publish now prove you published
No,
from the last presentation.
Actually, Bess, you don't have to publish. You have to submit it for publication.
Well, you know, not everything you do at a conference can turn around and be, I mean, if you're chairing a session that you've put together, it's very hard to get a publication out of that. It's
Again,
unrealistic. It's another trick to reduce our travel, it seems to me.
well, it's a trick that was decided by the leadership group. That set of regulations was a leadership group decision. It was not imposed by me.
I know that. I'm not
Okay,
saying
it
it
was
was.
the chairs.
I'm not saying it was.
No, it wasn't chair, it was the provost.
What?
It was the provost, it wasn't
Well,
us.
I mean, the provost clearly said,
I mean, it
you know,
wasn't
the
us.
number of.
Yeah, I
Blame
didn't
it on
think
the
so.
chairs. It was the provost who came up with you.
I mean, it was
Well,
the-
I mean, you have a
Publishing.
situation, Ray, that I think you need to take to the higher ups, that there is an there's so much demoralization. You know, our travel has been severely restricted. For some of us at this point, our workload looks like it's going to be increased. You know, we schlep out all over the state to teach courses. We see no benefit. I mean, there's a malaise that is palpable and needs that needs to be communicated to whoever is making the decisions on this.
And again, that, I think what we have to say is these are the characteristics of the workload policy that
Right.
need to be changed.
It needs to be. They are making decisions based on an old document that is no longer relevant.
They are basing the
That
decision.
has to be changed.
They are basing the decision on an old document that may not be relevant, but that has not been brought by the Council of Chairs or brought by the graduate program directors or by any of the graduate deans beforehand that said, this really needs to be changed.
Well, because it wasn't until a few weeks ago that we knew that major decisions were going to be based on that document.
Well, I understand.
So now we need to really
I
take
understand
action.
that, but that's
We
the
need to take action.
But and the best action we can take is to put together what we see
Right.
as changes in the policy. As I said this morning, do I think they will affect 12-13? No, because every additional course release we provide, we have to figure out somehow who's going to deliver the course.
Can I?
I'm planning
Yeah, go
on
ahead.
using, and I don't know how much it will take, I have asked for permission to use some of our fund balances to cover some of, so we don't lose as many lecturers as we may have to. Again, I think we need to find almost 6 to 7 to cover all of our needs and to give the system back what it needs.
6 to 7 lecturers are going to be let go.
No, we're gonna move 6 or 7, we have to reduce the roles of our lecturers by 3. We've done that by attrition, retirements, et cetera, and some program decisions that I've worked out with the chairs. What we have to do is identify some additional ones, because there are some needs in other programs, and we can't simply go to the lecturer and say, we need X number of additional lines. We're just not gonna get them this year.
So the long-term thing is that there's a contraction, an overall contraction of faculty slots, lecturers for the most part. I just want to clarify that.
Remember, what I said was that the institution created 40 full-time spots. On a moment's, I think it was late April or early May when the decision was made. We quickly hired people. But the money wasn't coming from the state to cover those slots, and the money has been taken out of reserves, it's taken out of a variety of things. I have to tell you that I'm really impressed by the fact that we haven't been told that they're gonna freeze our fund balances. They did that
Yeah, they did that a while back.
just before I
remember
got
that,
here.
yeah. And they finally paid us back. So I have a couple things to say, but I wanted to follow up. It was a new idea to me, to use some fund balances that are in departments to do a buyout. Is there any possibility you would have the wiggle room to do that?
That's a lot of money.
Well, the part that's confusing to me, and You know, I didn't take business as a major, but I've been involved in family businesses probably my whole life. So my understanding, and this is more as a graduate director, is that what's being counted are expenses, but not the revenue streams. Because the revenue streams that we count and produce right every semester in at least our department, which is ISTC and the graduate reading, have to do with each student who I field an inquiry about and joins our program. That produces $15,900 sort of dollars over the course of the program that they're in this program. They are paying that money into the institution. That's a revenue stream. It's really probably the highest priority of my job is fielding multiple inquiries every week. Steve the same, Leanne the same, David Robinson the same, Jeff when he was doing it, and Bill, and so on. So these inquiries are a revenue stream as soon as they send in that application, and we've got them in their first course. That's like a real plus on the spreadsheet. And when, for example, in the fall, I'm paying an adjunct $3,000 to teach one class, but in the fall, I'm going to teach that class instead. We already told the adjuncts goodbye. They were only saving $3,000, but if I miss one phone call because my time will be encumbered by teaching, which I love to do, but this is more teaching, and the administrative side is probably the best way we can bring in money. I missed that $15,000 and I've saved $3,000. That just doesn't add up to me in a business sense. And then similarly, when we generate 18 students per cohort in our TLN sections, and we now have 6 TLN sections ongoing right now, and we'll be starting 2 more next year. At least we have them in the works, but if we're told that we can't do it because we don't have any administrative time to make sure they're all in the program, you know, all this stuff that grad directors do of admissions and grad clearances and all the stuff that we do every day. I wonder, you know, how the people who are figuring out that they're trying to save money for the university, how they cannot count this revenue stream of about $200,000 per cohort. Times 6 is $1.296 million that we bring in. That's just grad reading, and I don't mean to hog the floor on it.
Well,
but it's just a matter of like, this doesn't seem to add up as managers, as people who are involved in trying to make sense of a business. Because if you have a division that's very successful as part of your company, why would you contract that and close that when that's your lifeblood? That doesn't make sense to me.
Well, because for a couple of reasons, one of which is that we aren't on center-based budgeting. I mean, the same argument could be made of some faculty member from from Fisher Science and Math, who's got 100 and some students in a course, generates a huge amount of money. They don't get to keep all that money. The money gets spread across the campus.
Right.
We don't get to keep, actually,
but you don't want to close down that class. It would be better to keep the revenue flowing instead of closing it.
And the fact of the matter is, as I said, I've already heard that one suggestion is, so we'll just reduce our graduate programs to 100. So if that's all we're going to get, we're going to reduce it to 100. Fine. Look around and decide who's going to leave. Because we won't need as many faculty if we reduce graduate program enrollments to 100. The TLN...
So does that make sense as a business
It makes no sense at all. We have in fact looked at closing off-campus programs. We are probably going to close one off-campus program because it's a relatively small size. And there are other programs. I mean, I will be the first to admit that if it were my choice, Southern Maryland would be closed because it's so far away. But the size of the enrollments are such that that would be counterproductive. But beyond that, the reality is that if it just broke even, or if it lost money, we wouldn't be able to close it because, at my understanding from Thomas, every time the suggestion was made not to continue it. When the decision was made to remove one graduate program from there, the amount of blowback we got from the legislatures was enormous. Shady Grove is not an inexpensive place to provide programs. The Heat Center is not an inexpensive place to provide programs. We would get enormous pushback from the system and the state if we were to withdraw our programs from Shady Grove. Just enormous pushback. So again, I think this can be part of our argument. If we want to reopen the discussion of TLN and how TLN funds are used and can be used, etc., we can do that. One of the concerns, and we went through a substantial number of sort of economic scenarios and cost offset analysis before we put through here's the deal we want to offer you. The deal was you cover all of these faculty who are now being paid by TLN revenues, take them as as stateside, and that means you're going to take all the revenues they produce because these people are teaching open enrollment courses. And the big question among the leadership was, so what'll that leave us? Well, it left us a little bit less, but it also left us with a lot smaller tab down the road. My guess is that we can reopen the whole discussion of TLN generates this is, etc. My assumption is, I'm not proposing it, but if I have to, part of my job is if you make a proposal, you got to anticipate the response to the proposal is they'll say, okay, this is worth discussing. Let's think about retaining all the revenue from TLN. If I were at the CFO's level, I would want to know why any part of the institution retains any of the tuition revenue. I'm obviously not going to propose it. I'm just saying that as we put our arguments together, we've got to decide, be careful how we present the arguments because, they're going to come back and they are going to include the other deans. One of the things I regularly encounter in deans meetings and provost meetings is to regularly hear about how the College of Ed has more expendable resources than any other college in the campus.
Right, and Bess was talking about the off-campus
A perfect
work
example
that
is
we
the
do.
MBA program. College of Business and Economics doesn't get any revenue off it. Doesn't get revenue out of that. If I were Charest, I would be saying, hey, those folks in education get it. I got this program with a bunch of grad students, MBA students downtown. Not only do I want the revenue to come to campus, but I want it to come to my college.
I'd love to compare our salaries to theirs.
That's a good point.
They get a hell of a lot more money than we do, which is a whole other thing that we haven't. Not only have we not gotten a raise in I don't know how long, we had furloughs for 3 years, no raise, an increase in workload.
And this sounds terribly insensitive, Bess, but the reality is that we have to take this in relation to our colleagues in California, for example, many of whom have been released.
Have been what?
Have been fired. There have been significant reductions in some colleges across some states because of the economic situation.
But I'm saying within this institution, why are we not talking about equity that way? I love the way the higher ups always talk about equity when it suits them.
But they are talking about equity that way. There is a Senate task force. Huh?
What's the guy's name?
The guy's name?
What'd you say?
Spoke to us yesterday.
Senate Task Force on Salary Compression.
Is it right? There's a Senate task force that's the biggest problem, not the biggest. One of the problems we've had, and one of the things I said earlier was, although it's not in the budget, the provost and president have committed to making sure that anybody promoted gets the increase that's associated with promotion. Although it's not in the budget, the system mandated that we could allow some adjuncts who qualify to become adjunct twos. They get a 10% increase in the $3,000 we pay, so they get $3,300 for teaching a course rather than $3,000. The issue of inequities is clear. I mean, we have a number of faculty who, until this year, never got what they agreed to get when they took the job, right?
Yes.
Right.
In fact, they not only didn't get it, they got less. And each year that we brought new faculty in many cases, we brought them in either at the same level of those people or at higher levels. So that what we have is a whole series of inequities, not the least of which is the fact that salaries have been absolutely stagnant for, I don't know, 3-4 years. I think we've had 2 or 3 years of furloughs. And salaries have been, there's no question about it. And the president is committed to doing something about it. They established, the Senate established this task force. There have been a variety of discussions, and you know, effectively the task force is going to come up and say, here's how we think salaries need to be adjusted, and here's how much it's going to cost. And then the question is, so where's the money going to come from? Well, the money is going to come from a couple of places. One is assuming that the state's economy turns around. With luck, the next governor will be committed to higher education, and will, you know, basically they'll provide funding for higher education when they have funding. I don't get it. I presented a proposal at one of the dean's meetings that if we were going to not grow, if there wasn't going to be this increment, why don't we figure out, given what we have available, how many students should we have enrolled? And was immediately had it sort of explained to me by the CFO, et cetera, is that the tuition generated by the 4.75 or 8% additional students during our no growth period is part of what keeps us floating. You know, it's partly, so the whole issue of what it's going to cost to get out of this hole, I think the task force is going to determine, and then they're going to have to figure out where do they either get the money, or where do they reconfigure things. I mean, part of what the strategic plan talks about is right sizing, and that is, are there programs that are insufficiently justifiable that those should be cut, and those resources should at some point be reassigned.
So, I don't want to stay on the business model too much, but I do want to say one more thing, which is that each department's different with its strengths and its needs. And if I were a manager of a business, I would look at what they need. It wouldn't necessarily be consistency across each division, but it would be that this particular division, in order to do research and development, to advance its program or its product, would need such and such. And I would support them and then maybe pull from the other. And so I think it's really important, if we're going to use a business model, well, we have to use some business thinking because of this revenue stream versus expenses. But we really can use some parts of that, and then we have to go a step further because we're educators. And we're not in the business actually to make money, or we wouldn't be sitting here. Any of us would be sitting here. We're in this business because we believe in something that's a much different kind of situation. I have two brothers who are owners of big companies, and so we have a hard time talking to each other because our lives are just totally different in terms of our goals. And the fact that in Southern Maryland we've reached so many teachers with the graduate reading program over 12 years is a great source of pride, actually. Karen Blair's just walking by, she started the program. Ha ha, we got you. And so we have created something that's very, very valuable. It's valuable on a national level, and I think that the people around the room sometimes don't realize until they go to a conference, as Bill and Leanne just came back from a national conference. I don't know if Jeff went. And the reputation of Towson as a place that has advanced degrees, that has really rich research opportunities, that has faculty who love to collaborate for research. That is so valuable. I don't have to tell you. You know how valuable it is. And yet we haven't communicated that in this mechanism of dollars and cents to explain well enough that if we have 12 faculty in the EDTL department who are all going to get hit next year with an extra course, that's the majority of the faculty in that department, that will have a measurable impact on national contributions at conferences. That will have a measurable quantity of service that will be cut. Some of those people will decide to stay at Towson. Others will definitely seek employment elsewhere. So what is the measurable impact of all those people leaving? So I think those are things that should be put back into the equation as you talk and advocate for us, that taking a workload document that's been around but has been interpreted by our chair in ways that work to build programs and help students and reach teachers and students in the field in wide ways and deep ways, have worked really well. It's a status quo that has worked tremendously and brought in lots of money for the university because we're money makers. So why would you deconstruct that? What is the advantage of it? I just am still having a hard time finding it.
Well, again, the advantage of it is, as you started by saying, is we haven't done a good job of expressing what it is we do that's different than other people in that respect. Again, remember that what we should have done was, when the days worked well and your chair could sort of not pay close attention and do what he did, and I didn't have to pay close attention, so I didn't have to say, what are you doing about this? It's a different time. We need to create the arguments that say that the policy needs to be changed. And I think we need to do that on the basis of a whole variety of things. And that's essentially the major task before us. Steve asked this morning, how long is it going to last? The answer is, I don't know. It's going to last, depending on what the legislature does this year. We may only have a portion of the hit so far for this year. Again, if the institution takes a $12 million hit, I don't know what's going to happen. Is the state going to come out? I mean, I saw in this morning's paper that they're going to increase taxes by about $300 million. This is a good start. And the reason it's a good start is they're increasing revenue rather than cutting expenses. What is the university going to be doing? Ideally, it's going to be working in a variety of ways to argue for its uniqueness. It's going to, ideally, with the president, going to argue that our per student allocation is vastly inadequate. I think, I don't remember the last tower light graph, but as I recall, we are either the lowest among the USM system, or we're right down there at the bottom 2 or 3. Bob's attempt to push the system into giving us an allocation that was between the best, the most resourced Master's Comprehensive and UMBC, which would have brought us up somewhere around 7,500 or 8,000 per student, which multiply it times 18 or 19,000 students is a lot of money. Got part of the way there, but didn't get all the way there. I think what we have to argue is, here's what we do. You will all see, if you didn't see already, that Nancy Grasmick has been appointed the Presidential Scholar. She is coming in with substantial resources from outside sources. The president is assuming that that will generate substantial development funds for the entire college. I have a meeting at 2 o'clock with development, who are trying to put together a set of endowments for the legacy walk and the oral history.
That'd be good.
Why are those things important? Because that pays for a whole lot of our scholarships. That pays for the France Merrick. Our assumption is that a substantial part of whatever funding we generate off that will go towards supporting faculty endeavors. The important thing is that every public statement that the president has made since she arrived here, she has provided extreme emphasis on the centrality of the College of Education to Towson University. My understanding is that it's going to result not only in funding for some of what Nancy is going to do, but will also make available a whole array of opportunities for folks across the college.
You know, all of this is great, and it's what continues to make it so difficult for me to wrap my head around it, that the bureaucracy is choosing to look at one side of the ledger only and putting at risk the work that we do to bring in lots of revenue and lots of production already.
It's not putting it at risk. It's saying that these are decisions it has to make to cover. The cost of the Nancy is not coming out of the university. In fact, it's bringing assets into the university. Yes, the READ program brings in resources. The READ program's resources cover part of the College of Education's cost that are not covered by our other revenues. We don't get our tuition revenue. The revenue generated by the College of Education are used to cover costs across the campus. Is that equitable? No, but I can tell you from a Research One perspective that if you were in a department or a college that generated a lot of external funding, particularly federal funding, so if you had $20 million in external funding, you have about $8 or $9 million in indirect cost. Those pay for stuff outside that program and that department, a good chunk. Again, the best thing we can do is to argue this is the impact of applying the workload as it is currently written on our programs, and more importantly, this is what we propose, and I think this should be done at multiple levels. It's got to be done in a way that we can get the support of graduate program directors, not just in the college, but graduate program directors. We've got to get it in a way that gets the Council of Chairs to agree that this revised campus workload is something that they will support. And we've got to get it so that when it goes before the Council of Deans, I've got at least 3 or 4 deans who say they'll support it also. Because any change in the workload is a precedent that directly impacts every other graduate program, every other department, every other college on campus. Yeah. One last thing, then I have to run to the funding meeting.
I appreciate the opportunity to hear this from your perspective. Council met on yesterday, and we did discuss workload. It's important that faculty have a voice in this discussion at this level. We would like, I'm representing council when I say the we, to continue this discussion with faculty so that faculty, 1, understands the facts, as Tom shared with us on yesterday, and 2, are able to suggest some of the arguments that we want to consider as we present a recommendation
to you and to our chairs as well. The unfortunate part is our chair was not or did not discuss this at length with our faculty, so I don't think the faculty really had, our faculty really had an opportunity to really talk about this in our departments, and that would be part of this process, to begin this discussion, to take feedback from faculty across campus, across our college, so that we're in a position to say, this is what we feel that we should be doing, and say that to you as you represent us on other levels. We've asked for April the 16th as an opportunity for faculty to come together to discuss workload. And we're hoping to be able...
Again, there's not a lot I can add. And April 16th is a good date because that's after April 15th.
Right.
Which is when we will hear sometime probably at or about April, not about US TAC, but when the legislature is gone, we will know what next year's budget is going to be. And once we know what next year's budget is going to be, we will know what the systems budget is going to be. And once we know the systems budget, we know what Towson's budget is. So we will then know what the reality, by then or soon thereafter, whatever ripples it has for the college, I'll know. One of the things that we should do that I think is more proactive is to say, okay, if we were going to revise that part of the policy, how would we do it? What should it look like? As was suggested by OC, is there an argument that says that it takes twice as long to advise a graduate student as it takes to advise an undergraduate student? That's the only
oranges.
That's the only.
Apples and oranges.
That's the. It's not apples and oranges. It's not apples and oranges. I did graduate programs for 30 years. The
I
fact.
think they're different, but there's
But
different
we
kinds
have.
of advising.
But you have to establish why 25 is the right number for graduate and 50 is the right number for undergraduate. The question, as was raised, is, you should be able to document how many. Of the X number of students in a program, how many do you meet with? How many does each person meet with personally? The undergraduates, the fact of the matter is, PeopleSoft has advisees identified with people. There has to be a record of advising sessions, etc. I think part of if we're going to create a proposal, it's that it be shaped in this way, it be documented in this way, and in some ways, it be paid for in this way. And one possibility is what I hear you potentially suggesting is that we'll pay for it with our TLN revenues.
And that should certainly be part of our discussion, faculty discussing TLN. Because
Yeah.
I'm certain that there are a number of us who really don't know how that TLN revenue is divvied up once it hits our campus.
And we've gone over it in detail with the chairs. Every dollar has been accounted for. Chairs have distribution models that they can share with their faculty. As I said before, part of what I expect, because I sent in the list of suggested lecturer renewals just before I left my office, is I'm going to get a call and it's going to be, you need to do more, and I'm going to say, let's make a deal. And I'll offer to pay for a couple of folks to keep them here.
I think the chair's job is the worst job in the world. But only because I think, it keeps getting back to what the chair does. I will tell you, without TLN, we would be in the red. There would be no copying. There would be no buying of anything additional, no kits. And the dean knows this. The budget in each department, I know I can only speak for early childhood, is the same that Terry had before I became chair. In fact, I think it's gone down. Thank God for TLN in that sense, because we wouldn't have this room.
Yeah, we agree.
But I'm saying, so
buy
TLN does do something.
I
It
mean,
may not do all it can do,
And
but I think it does do something.
I can give you another
And we
example.
need to say that the stateside budget needs to be increased.
Absolutely.
Right.
Because
See,
I don't know
they're
what we
using
would do
TLN.
without it.
It was supposed to be gravy. It was
Yes.
not supposed to be
It's-
used for basic
It
programming.
should not be used for basic
And
programming.
they have allowed it to be used that way so that you don't get an increase in your budget. That's not the way TLN
And
was
they
originally.
decided that
That
the
was
people
not
who
the
make
way-
it work will no longer have the time to do so.
No, I don't know.
Well,
The
again,
engines
are
being turned off.
Steve, again, you gotta understand that they didn't do this and say, okay, let's fix those EDL people. They
No,
did
not at
this
all.
as
They
a
didn't
campus.
think about it, what we do at all.
I mean,
No, I don't
Edith
think-
is
no,
in
I
the
don't
same.
There's
think
no
that's
boat.
recognition for what it takes to run a program director, or to run a program when advising is thrown out and if, is lumped in, and if removed for faculty, there's no time for program directing.
Well, then I
Right?
think what we need to do.
We want to generate
but what we need to-
money through
But what we
TLN
need to
and
do
feed
is to
people's
document
families.
what program, if you're saying they don't understand what you do as program directors, we need to document it.
Right.
Sure,
Well,
absolutely.
And we have.
And
It's
every
been
time I was a
woefully
grad
ignored.
program director, there was very detailed descriptions of what
Yeah,
I did.
there are some.
The grad program directors who have been asked to identify what their GAs do, there's a really simple reason for that. Part of what we're trying to do is to determine how many GAs are we paying for who essentially do clerical work, and does it make sense for us to hire some people to do clerical work? They would be here year-round, they would be available to expand the staff. Rarely, most of our GAs are not education graduate students. They're graduate students from other departments and other colleges. Has a decision been made? No. But essentially, we're starting to say, is that one way that we can cover some of these demands?
But it won't save money, it'll cost more money.
No, it won't. You know what it costs for a GA?
10,000 or so?
It costs $8,000 for stipend, and it costs, it's about $18,000 for any GA.
And not count this summer.
We
20
requested
20
an
hour.
administrative person
Yeah.
2 or 3 years ago.
$18,000 for a GA who's here for part of the year for half-time in the week. If you put two of those together, you've got a well-paid staff person who's here year-round, who is, got some continuity.
We originally had that for graduate programs. She used to be in Terry Atkins' office, and then it got hired upstairs to MAT. We used to have that.
Okay, I'll meet you there as soon as I can. Okay, if we have to we need to continue the discussion, we'll continue the
Thank you
discussion.
very much.
But again, the most important thing is start to craft what you want it to look like.
Okay, let's do it.